Thank you. I want to welcome everybody to the Montclair City Council meeting, along with the other bodies we serve on, and we will call this meeting to order. And before we get started, I just want to state that we're going to close this meeting in memory of, first of all, our former council member, Leonard, Pollits, who served the city for many years. He passed away late last month. And then also we're going to recognize and close the memory of our 13 armed services men. 12, of course, were Marines. One was at least 12 Marines, one member of the Army that were lost in Afghanistan, and then obviously 3 of them were from the Inland Empire, including one from Rancho Cucamonga. And so with that, we're going to start with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. And I will have the city clerk announce those 2 individuals.
Tonight's invocation will be given by Montclair Fire Department Chaplain Alan Olmos, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilmember Martinez.
Please stand.
Dear Lord, we thank you for this gathering, this meeting appointed by you. We ask, as Moses of old asked, that your presence be there at the tent of meeting, and we ask also that you lead, direct, give every bit of wisdom, discernment, and understanding for the council, for the staff, for the officers, for the public that are here today, tonight. I ask and I pray, dear God, that you lead and direct. I pray for the utmost of wisdom, dear God, to be bestowed upon us at this time, that we will make the right decisions and choices. And I even thank you in the beginning, the acknowledgments that were made, the acknowledgments of honoring those, Lord, who passed. We thank you and we praise you for this time. In your Son's name, Lord Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic as it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you. And as you were doing your Pledge of Allegiance, you saw a portrait of Leonard Pollits, and I will say this, I will not be here today, it wasn't for Mr. Pollits. The next item on the agenda is presentations, and we have one presentation item. Well, we're all here, right? But we'll do the roll call.
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rue. Mayor Dutray.
Present. So in regards to our presentation this evening, we have recognized different members of the community and their contributions for the COVID-19 experience we're all going through. So here in March of 2020, our Governor Newsom introduced Project Room Key, a program designed to house homeless individuals or individuals suffering from underlying health issues. In late of April 2020, County Supervisor Joseph Gonzalez requested the City of Montclair to facilitate the Project Room Key at one of our local motels. And I will say that part of this was that another community east of us did not want to have homeless individuals at a motel there. In the midst of the global pandemic, the owner and on-site managers of the Welcome Inn here in Montclair on Mission Boulevard stepped up and were an unprecedented example of how private business and government agencies can come together to assist vulnerable individuals during the public health crisis. In spite of the numerous challenges and demands associated with housing individuals experiencing homelessness, the owner and on-site manager of the motel never complained about the occurrence of day-to-day issues and nuisance activities generated by these occupants. With that said, stories of success can result from this program. 17 out of the 34 homeless individuals participating in the Project Room Key at this location. 17 of the 34 homeless individuals who participated were placed in permanent housing. The patience, compassion, and understanding displayed by the owners and managers of the Welcome Inn Motel were undeniable, a huge part of restoring faith in humanity and encouraging participants to overcome obstacles and break the cycle of homelessness. So we're going to recognize 3 individuals from Welcome Inn, and these 3, and I'm going to, I apologize if I mispronounce your names, but Josofat Alenis, also goes by Jose, Gopal Brumbat, also goes by David, and then I believe the property owner, Purushottam Patel, also goes by Peter. So come on over, guys. And Gabe, come on down too. The reason why Gabe is here, I'll grab this. The reason why Gabe is here, now, he didn't give him a citation, but Gabe is a big part of our homeless program, coordinates it, and he's worked well close with Homeless Inn, and it was because his connection to the county and the Welcome Inn, how these participants were able to come aboard. Well, come on over here, guys. So, Mr. Patel, there you are. Popa,
That's here.
there you are, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so come on over here, we'll take a little fast picture.
Okay.
Come on over here, don't be shy. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Remember meeting you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Okay, next item is we have public comment. And normally public comments is 5 minutes. First of all, we have, I believe we have people in the audience who want to speak. And then do we have anybody who wants to speak on Zoom or speak on a phone? If you're on Zoom, you raise your
Yes.
hand.
We did have one person who called in advance, Eric Cuevas. I see he did raise his hand,
Okay,
so.
we have, that's it. So anybody else who wishes to speak on Zoom or wishes to Zoom, raise your hand. If you're on the phone, it's star 6. Am I correct?
Star 9,
Star 9 to raise your
raise
hand.
your hand, yeah.
Star 9 to raise your hand, star 6 to unmute.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do this. We're going to start with the members of the audience. I think you already have the card, so we'll start there. Go ahead and call him.
Mayor, Mr. Cuevas requested to speak in advance. I received his request this morning to speak at the meeting. He's on the phone. We're
Okay.
on Zoom.
Okay, again, I'll just remind everybody, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, please start.
Okay. Yes. Okay, please unmute yourself. Mr. Cuevas? Can you please unmute yourself? Oh my gosh, every time, I'm so sorry.
Okay, he's
Hi.
on. Go ahead. You have
Good
five-
evening.
We can hear
I'm
you.
thank you. Good evening to the city council. First and foremost, my condolences to the family and the city for the recent passing of the council and its member. Thank you for allowing me the privilege to speak tonight. My name is Eric Cuevas. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Navy. Upon my discharge, I became a resident of Montclair immediately the next day, 11 years ago. Before that, I was on active duty for 6 years before the city of Montclair became my home. I'm here today for the first time to comment on an issue that has existed in my neighborhood for many years. During the time that I have resided in Montclair, I have observed many major changes and improvements throughout the city. However, at the same time, I have noticed no major changes in certain areas as well. More specifically, the alleyway attached to my home between Monte Vista, Helena, and south of San Bernardino Street. I have brought it to the attention of city management and personnel, and now I am bringing it before the council to strongly consider adding it to their agenda as soon as possible and authorize the reconstruction of the alleyway. My main goal tonight is to begin a process of awareness that will lead to this consideration. But here are some facts I have gathered to keep in mind for my request. Number one, most of my surrounding major and residential streets have had major, full, significant improvement, including San Bernardino Street over the years. Two, during my time here, I have not witnessed any major significant reconstruction of my alleyway. However, I have noticed from time to time some Band-Aid repairs and community cleaning, but this is not enough. It does not last. According to city engineering, it is possible that the time period could potentially be at least 18 years since the last major improvement of my alleyway. The extent can also go as far as never having major full reconstruction since the housing tract was laid, according to city engineering. I hope these two facts alone could be enough to consider my request. Number 4, the immediate adjacent alley north of my location had major full reconstruction approximately in 2017 at a cost of $175,000. My guess, it would require probably about $200,000 for the cost of this improvement now to account for rising costs. And finally, my alley has developed a poor road condition for driving and water drainage. In addition, it has developed a reputation for major dumping of many kinds of waste, vehicle abandonment, and disregard of city code. Those that I have spoken to from the city are aware of this. In conclusion of my comment, I am hopeful that this can be accomplished. Again, I appreciate your time and the privilege to speak tonight. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, let's have our next speaker, please.
Okay, Mr. Gary Harper.
Hello, my name is Gary Harper. I live over on Polson Avenue between Palo Verde and San Bernardino. I have 2 issues since he just brought up the alleyway. And the other issue is with the police chief. The alleyway was repaved, which was great. But even before Central Avenue was repaved, we've had people come down through the alley from Palo Verde to San Bernardino Road. They don't obey what I understand is a 15-mile speed limit. I talked with the city way back when that was repaved about putting speed bumps in along that section. And the city replied to me was, you have to get a petition, sign it by all the homeowners, not the renters, on that block between Palo Verde and San Bernardino and that other little section of San Bernardino to Carrillo. Well, I don't have any way of knowing if these homeowners on my side of the street and the side of Central that it borders are renters or homeowners. So no speed bumps. Now my garage door opens to the alley to go in and out. If I pull into my garage, I'm scared to death for me or my wife to back out of our garage to leave the house in case somebody's speeding down there, especially when Central is blocked off or limited to 1 lane sometimes. What's the alternate? Going down the alley. It's very dangerous. I don't know if I had a list from the city giving me the addresses with the homeowners, not the renters, I can do that. I'm retired. I have all the time in the world. But I don't have any way of finding who's renting or owning. That would be a great help to everybody on the Central side and the Montclair side. I mean, on the Polson side. I don't know what can be done since the alley was already paved, if they can put speed bumps in.
Thank
know.
you. What I will ask staff to do, I know the first speaker, I'm not sure he's on the phone or not, but in regards to your situation, if you can, when you talk about alleys, and I'll put this a stop right now. In regards to alleys, if you can send us a little, I don't know if you have an email or just send us a little letter to us and give this to the city clerk, explaining your situation, which alley, and then maybe I'm gonna ask city staff, they can look into it further, prepare a memo to the city council, we understand what's going on. Maybe city staff can assist you on those property owners there too, so you know which ones are property owners. So we'll do that for you. But if you can give us a little description where your address is or a block, I don't need your address if you don't want to disclose that, but just get an idea what alleys you're talking about. I appreciate that. And then we'll get staff to work on it, a memo to us on your situation.
My next questions are really for the police chief. Back on August 5th, there was an accident in front of my house with my vehicle. It was parked. My neighbor came from across the street and told me somebody hit your truck in the street. So I hollered at my wife to look at the camera and
Yeah,
see.
well, unfortunately, you have to address this as a city council, and have you talked to the police chief about this yet?
No, every time I go over there, I talk.
He is here, so if you want to talk to the chief of police, please do so. Technically, we should not be talking about any incidents here
Okay.
at the council dais for confidential reasons, but he is here, and feel free to talk to him. And if you
Okay.
can't get a hold of him, give me a call, and I'll make sure you get a hold of him.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you, sir. All right, next speaker, please.
Next is Peter Patel.
Good evening, all city mayors and all the executive and everyone's. I just came to express here my appreciation to the city and particularly police officers. And I like to thank for last 40 years of my business or not businessman's experience. It is unique experience, and always, I'm not artificial person. What I speak is from my heart. There's a Montclair Police Departments is one of the finest police department in Southern California. It's always registered in my heart, and I had gone through experience. And I like to appreciate the police department, all officers. I never had any experience with them that I feel uncomfortable or feel to complain. It's outstanding. Today we were able to contribute in COVID circumstances because I know every motel manager, they were scared to death because they know if everybody they allow, then they will be part of the victims and they were scared to death. But I had told them, I said, let's we work together. It is our responsibility, moral obligation, that we stand behind, work all together in order to outcome these emergency situations. And one thing we can count is the Montclair police officers. They stand behind us. They will help in emergency anytime we need, and exactly they did. And we were successful because of the police officers. Their duty, we can call 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. They immediately, within few minutes, they are there, and they have supported. And I personally like to give credit to them. I feel we should not underestimate them, their services, because I know when I look at as a nation, then sometime we police officers, we had, because of some incidents happens, we had downgraded. But the police, they are the safety and security of our life and all citizens' life. We should respect them more. And I like to respect their family that they had given us this gift to us. And particularly also, I like to appreciate you as all the staff's executive committee that's with the city mayor, that you have the great vision that you like to promoting, like you give us appreciation or thankful to us. is giving us the responsibility and moral obligation that let's we work, we are part of the city, we should work as a city, let's promote the city and make the best city possible. So your vision is a beautiful, sometimes I feel, I don't know how many cities in whole nations, they have the same vision, but your vision is appreciable to me, and I like to thanks to
Thank you very
all
much.
of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I just remember, I have 4 council members here, so, and of course, we have an excellent staff here too. So they're all part of the vision. We're a small city, but we're mighty. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Carolyn Raft.
Good evening, council members. Mr. Starr, Ms. Robbins. My guys may get tired of me, but Mr. Lopez, sorry I can't call you councilman because you don't belong or deserve the title to sit on that podium. It came to my attention, and I'm telling your colleagues and audience, you were quoted calling our present Congresswoman Norma Torres, and I quote, this is a quote, "I would trade my dim-witted bimbo Congresswoman Norma Torres for this guy." He was referring to Congressman Ryan Zinke, who was newly elected to the Congress at that time. May I remind you that Congresswoman Torres has done everything she can possibly do in support to help get the goal line to Montclair, and a true friend to our city. And you, sir, called her a dim-witted and a bimbo. Just what does that make you? Have the proof. She at least made her way through the ranks to get where she is today. She is highly educated and been in politics for a long time. This is more than I can say for you. Anyone that has made that statements you have in the past regarding Congresswoman Torres, as well as the LGBTQ going back as far as 2005, certainly doesn't belong on the council. Please don't try to deny this because I have all printout of your quote, and this is just one to mention, and there is a whole lot more. I hope by next election, our residents get a wake-up call and make this your one and only term. Every time there's a council meeting, I listen to you sit up there and constantly negotiate for the fire department. They don't need you to defend for them. They are very capable of doing so for themselves, as they have for years negotiated when their contract comes due. This city does not run on the fire department alone to keep us safe. Every department in the city deserves the same consideration as the fire department does, because they work hard. They keep us safe every day with our roads, our buildings, code enforcement, homeless, policing. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to go into all the details at each one because it would be too long as to what their services are. So please don't sit there constantly bringing up the fire department on every single thing that comes up, budget or agenda items that you want them to be with raises or included. Just because they endorsed you, people are tired of hearing you advocate for one department. I have a request. And the city is looking for people to come in because we do have a lot of vacant buildings in the city. I think we need a animal hospital. The one that we have right now, which is Blue Cross Animal Hospital, they are so hard to get. First of all, they never answer the phone, and you have to make an appointment. So how are you going to make an appointment if they don't answer the phone? They have one day a week that they have walk-ins. It's only, and they close at 2. So if you have a problem with your pet, you can't get in. And I gave them an earful this afternoon. So I told them by the time I could get in to see them, probably my poor pet would be a dead dog. And I told him I was going to, when I come to the council tonight, I was going to ask if possibly, when you are looking at people to come into the city, please consider looking at and advocating for animal hospital. We do need more than just the one that people can afford. Maybe that's why they're so busy, because they are the only ones that can be afforded right now. But poor people in the city need a place to take their pets. Thank you very much. And I really like the idea of what you guys are doing about recognizing people that have been an asset to the COVID-19, that have been for the city of Montclair. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next speaker, please.
Rose Delgado.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rose Delgado, and I came last Monday at the first meeting. I'm here for two reasons. The first one is I'm asking how to add to the agenda the Vernon School. I spoke with Edward on not too long afterwards, but when I spoke with Ms. Tovar, the principal of the school, this morning, and I looked back at the YouTube video of me speaking now, hello, because I didn't know it was recorded, someone told me. Not a very tech-savvy person, but anyways, Mr. Mayor, you did tell Edward to reach out to the school. Until this day, 1 month later, it still has not been done. Me and you did talk, Edward, and you said Monica's main mission, September 1st, being hired here, was going to be to address the school. And when I spoke with Monica just moments ago, she had to ask me what school. So I don't think her main mission or her main project right now is Vernon School, because she should know Vernon School by name when I am talking about it. It is a very serious issue. Last time I spoke here, I said it was 2 years ago, September 6th, that he died. It was 3 years ago, and still nothing has been done yet. So I ask in a very strong voice, because God gave it to me, that this be addressed, and that you call Ms. Tovar personally, Mr. Edward Starr. Then Monica can call her, but I think out of respect, this woman saw this child die. This woman was this child's principal. She lives with this guilt, and there's nothing she can do. When I talked to her today, she was very surprised that the city had not contacted Vernon School, considering it's a part of its city. We only have 13 schools. It's not that hard to stay in contact with each principal. I have yet to this day been contacted by Monica, and I gave her my phone number personally. I wrote it on her piece of paper, so I expect to speak with her this week. I was under the impression that was her main project, but I do not feel that way. My second thing on the agenda is I asked you all to pray for my friend Andrea Martinez at Montclair Hospital. She fought for 5 weeks. She died on Wednesday. The quality of that hospital is below the minimum. I already filed a formal complaint. I'm a licensed nurse. Although I do not practice, I work with people on Skid Row. I would not treat any of them the way that these people treated my friend Andrea. She was alive on Saturday, awake, without the tube on her. I went to the Rams game on Sunday, and when I came back, she had already diminished so much. The quality of care there, I can't say everything. The things that I saw, I wish I didn't. I made a grievance on behalf of the family and the friends that watched Andrea. I ask that if you're a resident of Montclair and you're watching this, that you never go to that hospital. Go to Pomona Valley. Go anywhere else. Do not stop at Montclair Hospital. I went to the emergency there once during Andrea's hospitalization because I too suffer with very bad medical stuff. They gave me the wrong medication. I had a panic attack. I think I dialed numbers that I don't even remember. I've never been treated like that. I've been to the hospital 23 times this year. Never have I been treated the way I was when I was there. And to know that my friend died there on Wednesday, she left 3 small children back. She's gone. We cannot bring her back. I'm not angry for that. I'm angry for any one of you, your family or your friends. God forbid something happened to the school, the kids, they have to go there. So I ask that we shut that down and we do a full investigation. Patience, if you have anything to do with this, Javier, I don't know your role in this, but I ask you as the mayor because you are the top. Everything rises and falls with leadership. I ask you to go in there and take a walk through. See the way they're treating some of these people. Because I walked through there for 5 weeks. I was a patient there 3 weeks ago. And I would beg you never to send your children there. So please let me know when this can be on the agenda that we follow through with this Measure L and these bonds. And I thank you all for your time. I pray for you and your family and your friends.
Thank you very much. And I will encourage you to stay in the meeting. We're going to talk about spending about $45 million, but stay in the meeting. We'll talk some more about that'll be under public hearing items. So stay in the meeting. We'll talk some more. Thank you. All right, next speaker, please.
Okay, we have Ruby Long on
Okay.
Zoom.
Ruby Long there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Ruby Long from Supervisor Kurt Hagman's office. And I just wanted to make a quick announcement just to remind you all that this Saturday we'll be hosting our shredding event. It's the 25th. It's going to be this time in the city of Upland at the Upland Memorial Park. It's from 9 a.m. till 12 noon. And we ask that you limit to 3 boxes per car, and it is free. And so we do look forward to seeing you all there. I ran into Councilmember Ben Lopez, and he suggested that I also announce in Spanish. So I'll go ahead and do that right now as well. Estoy aquí de parte del condado de San Bernardino, del Kurt Hagman. Y les quiero recordar que este fin de semana vamos a tener un evento para destruir los documentos que tengan. La troca va a estar ahí de las 9 a las 12 y va a estar en la ciudad de Upland, en Upland Memorial Park. Y pedimos que tengan no más de 3 cajas por carro. And that's it on my end. Thank you, guys, and we hope to see you there.
Thank you. Okay, any more speakers?
Yes, Bruce Culp looks like he has his hand up.
Okay, Bruce, you're the last speaker.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Alrighty. I just saw in the news a few minutes ago that today the United States passed the number of deaths in COVID from the Spanish flu deaths today at 675,000 people. And the Spanish flu was over almost 100 years or a little over 100 years ago. And you would think that with the technology and medical miracles that they have today, that we wouldn't even come close. But that is not, it's not technology and it's not medical advances that are preventing that are making this number of deaths. It's leadership. It's leadership all the way. People listen to their leaders and follow their examples. And when you have poor leadership and people following and listening to them instead of the science, and leaders not following the science and the medical professionals, people die. And so I was just looking at the dais today, and I just want to thank each and every council member that is wearing a mask today and showing true leadership in what people see from their leaders. They will follow by example. And so for those of you who are wearing masks, you are the true leaders out there. You're telling your constituents and the residents of Montclair, masks are important, and the staff too. Those of you who are wearing masks today, I appreciate your leadership and setting the example for the rest of us residents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item here. We have public hearings, and we have actually 4 public hearings. And the first public hearing is consider adoption of the Montclair Public Financing Authority's resolution number 21-01 for the issuance of lease revenue bonds. And I would say this, that I think today is an important date in the city of Montclair, because we're talking about expending bonds that the voters of Montclair passed through Measure L last November, and so this is part of that support of the Montclair voters. So staff, you can start the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the
The
City
public-
Council.
And the public hearing is also open.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you indicated, Mr. Mayor, of course, this evening we are considering two very important measures for the future of this community. The first one, and this one directly relates to improvements to the infrastructure of the city. This is a lease revenue bond series 2021A. And this is not working. I have this one right here. That's not going to work. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working either. Oh, okay. So at the, I typically don't go over the title of the agenda report, but I'm going to do this evening because it's very important that the council understands what you are considering for this evening. There are two different entities that are considering this item tonight. The first one is the Montclair Public Financing Authority, and the second is the City Council. So I will go over each of the actions that you are asked to be considered this evening. The Montclair Public Financing Authority is asked to consider adoption of resolution number 21-01, authorizing issuance of lease revenue bonds, series 2021A, not to exceed $49 million. Approving appointment of the financial team, approving execution and delivery of related documents, and authorizing other matters. The City Council is asked to consider adoption of resolution number 21-3320, approving the authority's issuance of the lease revenue bonds. Again, that's series 2021A. The authority's appointment of the financial team, and the authority's execution and delivery of related documents, and authority's authorization of other matters. Together, the council and the authority are asked to authorize the city manager to execute each of the documents related to the offering and sale of the lease revenue bond series 2021A. At the April 2021 workshop of the City Council on pension obligation infrastructure bonds, the council did provide direction to proceed with evaluating both issues. Lease revenue bonds are not considered a liability subject to voter approval if they qualify under the following lease exception standard. A joint power financing authority issues the revenue bonds secured by lease payments made by the municipality under a lease agreement, and in this case, that would be the authority that would be acting in that regard. Second, the obligation to pay rent is contingent upon the lessee, the city, having beneficial use and occupancy of the lease premises, and that will certainly be the case as it relates to this series. If lessee fails to pay rent when due, there can be no acceleration of future rent due, and that is clear in the documents that are being presented for your consideration this evening. So therefore, based on the above lease exception, the proposed lease revenue bond series 2021A does qualify under this lease exception. At the June 2021 review of the proposed fiscal year budget, the council approved use of general fund revenues, including Measure L, for payments related to the 2021 series of lease revenue bonds if the City Council decided to go in that direction. The 2021 lease revenue bonds would be issued based on an indenture which sets out the terms of the bonds, including payment, interest rates, redemption, and covenants of the city. The authority functions as the lessor and the city as the lessee. Bonds would be federally tax exempt because they are used to finance public capital improvements owned and used by the city. Exhibit 1, which is attached to your agenda report, identifies the need for approximately $98 million in projects, including median, street, park, and infrastructure improvements. This does not include other things such as right-of-way and other issues related to identifying and detailing the projects that would be presented to the City Council. The list of projects on the following slide will be returned to the City Council at an October workshop for further consideration and prioritization. So when you consider the projects being presented to you tonight, they are not cast in stone. These are merely the projects that staff has identified in the community that attention needs to be paid to. At a future workshop, we will bring this list back to the City Council. We will ask that you prioritize the list. If there are items on the list that you want to have deleted, you can certainly do that. If there are items that you want to add, you can certainly do that. We are not tied to this list as it relates to the bond. The process simply needed to have us identify a potential list to demonstrate that there are projects in the community that need to be done that the bond monies would be spent on. This is a summary of the project list that was provided, that will be provided to you in a more comprehensive way at a future workshop. You can see that we have focused on median street improvements, parks, and infrastructure. For each of these, there is an estimated construction cost. So for example, in the area of street improvements, there's a cost of almost $29 million. Estimated design costs are $400,000. Right-of-way acquisition costs, $2 million. And project management costs just over $1 million. Parks, we are estimating an expenditure of over $13 million. Estimated design cost about $500,000, and project management costs are $200,000. As it relates to infrastructure projects, in this particular case, things like expanding broadband throughout the community, obviously the Central Avenue Bridge that has been discussed by the City Council and has been on previous agendas for your consideration, improvements to Fire Station 152, a public parking garage that we are contemplating in North Montclair in relation to the Village Partners Project, San Antonio Creek Channel Trail, systemic street analysis and safe routes to school improvements. Those are obviously the improvements related to making certain that we make the necessary improvements based on the report throughout the community to try and create a safer community as it relates to vehicles that are traversing our roadways, as well as pedestrians using our roadways. And then the safe routes to school component, which is designed to try and improve the roadway access by not only the vehicles, but the children taking their routes on to school, making the necessary modifications to facilitate that. That could include anything such as sidewalks, additional signage, additional signalization, and anything that is necessary to make certain that the routes that children take to schools are designed to be safe going forward. And the costs related to the infrastructure improvements are about $55 million, estimated design costs a little over $1.7 million, and project management costs about $500,000. Total, as I've indicated, is about $98 million. And of course, on top of that, there are other costs that we would have to endure in relation to moving forward with these projects, and that will be part of a more comprehensive presentation to the City Council at a future workshop. The lease assets for the bond are 11 city parks. They will provide bond security, and they are identified in Exhibit 2 to your agenda report. However, I do need to point out that none of these lease assets will be mortgaged. The city is the fee owner of the leased properties. The authority and the city will enter into a site lease as of October 1st. Under the site lease, the authority will lease the properties from the city, and the city will sublease the leased properties from the authority. None of the leased properties constitute security for the 2021 bonds. Under a lease agreement, the city will agree to pay semi-annual base rental payments for use and occupancy of the leased properties. The city will covenant to make all necessary appropriations by including all base rental and additional payments due under the lease in the annual operating budgets. This, of course, is an ongoing practice for the city. Anytime we identify indebtedness of the city, we have carved out a section of the budget where we not only talk about the indebtedness, but we talk about the funding structure for the indebtedness, and that will certainly be a part of this process going forward. The city will covenant to make all necessary, sorry, I already said that. The city will covenant to secure and maintain certain insurance coverages, including rental interruption, use and occupancy, property, general liability, workers' compensation, and title. I do need to point out that a number of these insurances the city is self-insured on, and we are also covered under the California Insurance Pool Authority. So these are part of our normal insurance practices going forward. So most of these are already covered based on the city's allocation of funding for insurances. This demonstrates the properties that will be a part of the lease agreement, the 11 different parks. It also provides an appraised value in relation to going forward with this bond. The city did hire an appraiser to give a estimated appraised value for each of the park sites in Montclair that will be part of this bond. And the appraisal came up with a total of approximately $49 million in estimated appraised value for these properties, which is more than sufficient to cover the cost of the lease revenue bond, which we project to be at $45 million. I did indicate that it would not be in excess of $49 million, but we do anticipate that the bond issue will actually be $45 million. The lease revenue bonds are limited obligations of the authority, secured solely by a pledge of revenues, that is, the money that is payable for the lease payments, which will be made by the city from the general fund. The obligation of the city to make the base rental payments under the lease agreement will not constitute an obligation for which the city is required to levy or pledge any form of taxation, or for which the city has levied or pledged any form of taxation or full faith credit. So in other words, the funds related to this, to the payments on the lease revenue bonds will strictly be made out of the general fund. Payments made to the authority by the city would be assigned to a trustee and used to make debt service payments on the bonds. The authority will assign to the trustee the authority's rights, title, and interest in the lease agreement, and the trustee will establish a revenue fund and hold it in trust for the city until all rental payments are made in full and the 2021 bonds are no longer outstanding. All payments will be made by the city directly to the trustee. By adoption of resolution number 21-01, the authority approves and consents to the issuance of the 2021 lease revenue bond series 2021A, approval and appointment of the financing team, which is U.S. Bank National Association as the trustee, Nixon Peabody LLC as bond counsel, Richards, Watson, and Gershon as disclosure counsel, Hilltop Securities as underwriter, and Urban Futures, Inc. as municipal advisor. By adoption of resolution number 21-01, the authority approves and consents to the form and authorize execution of the following documents: the site lease, which defines a certain city-owned property that will be assigned to the authority. Parks appraised, again, at almost $50 million. Rent would be advanced for the next 30 years. The lease agreement, which would provide the city with use of rental proceeds from the site lease, the bond funds, for public infrastructure projects, and the city would lease back the parks from the authority and provide funds for bond repayment to the authority. Term commences on the closing date of the bond issue and ends April 1st, 2051. The city has the option to substitute other city-owned lands and facilities. That means that at any time, if we want to remove any of the parks from the lease, then that is up to the city to decide. Assignment and agreement. This document assigns to the trustee for payment on the bonds the authority's rights, title, and interest in the lease agreement, including the right to receive the base rental payments. Approve the form and authorize the execution of the following documents. Also, again, indenture. The U.S. National Bank Association will receive lease payments from the city and make payments to the owners of the bonds. Continuing disclosure certificate. This comports with a SEC requirement to have financial data of the city analyzed by an impartial third party and disclose that information to a national repository for access by the public and the bondholders. The preliminary official statement. This document provides information to the potential bond purchasers about the city and discusses the structure and financing terms of the bond issue. This is a very important document to the process, typically represents a bulk of what is being represented about the city, again, and the bonds, and is the primary document that the bondholders will look to. And there's the bond purchase agreement, which authorizes the underwriter to purchase the bonds from the authority related to the public offering. Approval and appointment of the authority's financing team, again, is also a process of what you are approving in relation to your adoption of resolution number 21-3320. This action, of course, is by the city council. So this action, under your approval of this resolution, approves everything that we've just discussed related to the authority. So again, you would be approving the financing team that the authority approved. The council would be approving the form and authorizing the execution of the documents that we just covered. The fiscal impact related to your consideration of the bond includes the following. The city and the authority propose to issue $45 million in lease revenue bonds. The estimated sources and uses are as follows. There is the reoffering premium, which is about $5.8 million, and this is in relation to the principal amount of the bonds, which is $45 million. Total sources will be about $50 million. Uses of new project funds are about $50,431,000. The underwriter's discount is approximately $213,000. The cost of issuance is approximately $220,000. Therefore, the total uses are $50,865,000. Currently, the yields for the bonds are ranging from 1.9% in 22 to 2.8% in 2051, and the true interest cost, which includes the cost discussed above, is calculated at approximately 3.064%. The financing team will finalize a bond credit rating with a bond sale estimated in early October 2021. With proceeds available to the city on or about October 27th. That means, of course, that the city will be in receipt of the $50 million and will be able to begin all of the projects that the council ultimately approves. In this particular table, it demonstrates what the principal payment will be for each year, the interest payment for each year, and the annual debt service for each year. So as you look at this particular table, you will see that the annual debt service will be approximately $2.6 million. It doesn't fluctuate much from year to year. And again, the bond payments will be made through 2051. Over the 30-year period, the city will pay $45 million in principal, $32,283,966.67 in interest. This equals a total payment of $77,283,966.67, and it will be paid out semi-annually on April 1st and October 1st of each year, commencing with April 1st, 2022. However, I do want to note that while the bond amount is $45 million, the city will receive that additional $5 million in premium that will be paid by the bond holders. That's not part of the payment cycle. And therefore, while it looks like we are paying the total sum of $77 million, effectively subtract $5 million from that total, and that shows you the advantage that the city picks up in relation to the bond payments. This particular table shows how level the annual bond payment will be over the course of the 30-year period. Staff's recommendation is that the Montclair Public Financing Authority adopt resolution number 21-01, authorizing issue of the lease revenue bond series 2021A not to exceed $40 million, approve the appointment of the financial team, approve execution and delivery of the related documents, authorize other matters related to the above, that the City Council adopt resolution number 21-332, approving the authority's issuance of the lease revenue bonds, Series 2021A, not to exceed $49 million. Approve the authority's appointment of the financial team, approve the authority's execution and delivery of related documents, and approve the authority's authorization of other matters, and that the City Council and the authority together authorize the city manager to execute each document related to the offering and sale of the lease revenue bonds. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Before I open up to public comment, are there any questions from council members? I don't see any questions right now, so let's go ahead and open up to public comment. Do we have any members of the public who want to speak, Andrea?
I don't have any
No?
cards for this item, and I
Okay.
don't see any hand, oh, wait, I see a hand. Bruce Colt?
Culp.
Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
Thank you very much. Wow, that looks like a lot of money, and but the list of projects and improvements throughout the city makes us a better city, which brings in, ultimately people come to beautiful cities that have lots of improvements and are showing, development and things like that. So developers look at cities and think, hey, where do I want to do business? Well, a city that wants to show that they can keep their financial finances intact. I think our city does a wonderful job of, being very prudent with our tax dollars, and it's a lot of interest to pay. But I like the level plan it gives our budgeting staff at the city a consistent number every year that they can look at and say, I know how much we've got to pay every year, rather than cyclical ups and downs in the marketplace. So that was really a nice look at that even payment throughout most of the life of that thing. On the list of projects, it mentioned the Safe Routes to School, which I hope Ms. Delgado heard and understood that means things around schools will be improved, and these things take time and money, and we all want to get them done immediately, but as you can tell that when we're talking about big sums of money, it does take time. So I also would look forward to seeing improvements in school safety and having children being able to easily and safely get to school. The Safe Routes to School item on this list hopefully gets that done, as well as the San Antonio Channel, which passes by several schools and gives kids the ability to go down a trail that is not crossed very often by cars. So it's a very safe way to get to and from schools. Lastly, I just want to ask, this is all pretty darn complicated for the average resident to understand. What are the largest risks involved with something like this? Like if we default on a payment, what happens to us as a city? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will close the public hearing, and I'll bring this matter back to the city council. And let me see, who wants to speak first? I have nobody in the queue. Anybody want to speak? No? Come on up. Come on up. I'll open up a public hearing again. Yeah, I mean,
It's very quick, but we spoke at the same time. You're louder than me, so you didn't hear. You said of the 11 parks at any time, it's up to your guys' discretion which ones we pull back on, that there is a chance that you're not going to fix all 11 parks. What would be the decision of what park doesn't get fixed?
well, that will be the decision of the city council. The city council will have a workshop to talk about specific projects. Today is really to talk about the bond, the issuance of the bonds.
I was just curious.
And then we'll come back at a future meeting where we'll actually talk about how to spend this money. And then, we can discuss alleys, we can discuss the school safety, as you brought up, some of the issues.
Yeah.
But that's a future meeting.
I'm glad that Bruce understands that this can be complicated for the average person. I hope you also understand that I'm just trying to understand, so thank you.
No problem, thank you. All right, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and again, Councilmember Rue. Mayor Pro Tem Rue.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In looking at this, we have a community where people have requested certain things be done. Whether they're on this list or not tonight isn't the issue. We're going to talk about a lot of this in the future. But in order to pay for those, we have to find a way to do it. This is the only way we have. Somebody can come up with other ways to do it, that's great. If people want parks, they want alleys, they want a whole bunch of other things on this list, and probably more. This is our way of trying to at least find a way to fund that. And we're looking 2051, A lot of people in this room probably won't be here when these bonds are paid off. So we're looking to something for the future. The people who may not even be here today will take advantage of what we're doing. So for those who may question and say, well, it's a lot of money, it is, but we have to find a way to fund these. These are things you've said are important. We will come back and have a workshop on some of these items, but they seem to be a pretty significant list of what we hear all the time. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lopez.
Mr. Starr, on page 16, which looks like the forecast for the debt service, the columns all look consistent. I guess this is to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Culp was asking. What assurances do we have in place in the event that our local sales tax economy takes a severe dive, the overall economy hits a recession, and obviously that draws down revenues, draws down the anticipated Measure L money that we are using as, for lack of a better word, I guess, collateral for the bonds, as one source of revenue. What mechanisms do we have in place to kind of keep us solvent in that regard, so we don't default on anything, so we're not shorthanded and we have to pull from reserves or other avenues, streams of money?
Well, I should point out that online with us is Robin Thomas. She is our underwriter with Hilltop Securities. Also with us is Andy Kim, who is our bond counsel. So they may certainly want to pipe in and respond to the question. But as part of this process, we do agree to covenants. And one of the covenants is that we agree to the pledge of money in the budget on an annual basis to make certain that we make payments on the bonds. So it is effectively an obligation ongoing of the city to continue making the payments, that we identify general fund monies. We can talk about Measure L, but Measure L is part of general fund. So while Measure L is generating the necessary dollars for us to make that commitment, we carve out a certain amount of money, in this particular case, approximately $2.6 million in the budget on an annual basis. We understand that that is an ongoing cost, and we are obligated to carry that in the budget until the bonds are no longer a obligation of the city. So that would mean that we would obviously have to adjust our budget elsewhere to make certain that we stay true to our good faith and obligation and commitment to make certain that payments on the bonds continue on an annual basis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one quick comment. I think it's important to note that although this is a very complicated process and it's very expensive, but at the end of the day, improvements are happening. And I am tickled to be a part of the process where we can make Montclair a better place, because that's what we're all here to do. That's all I have.
Thank you. I'll just comment the following. Last November, the Montclair voters gave the City Council confidence with over 67% voter approval of Measure L. And I'll tell you why. Because the residents of this community want good services, obviously, but also want good infrastructure and facilities. And so when we talked about improving streets and parks, and also doing I think the important things are the seismic safety, as discussed earlier. Those are the things the Montclair, not just the voters, but the Montclair population want in this community. So I am excited this evening that we are now here. We have $50 million, and the next step is to, for us, and we'll hear from the community, that's important too, we want the community to be here, and how the $50 million should be allocated to what I call important quality of life projects to this great community of ours. Is there a motion for approval?
Mr. Mayor, I will make a motion to approve item number 21-01, authorizing the issue of lease revenue bond series 2021A, and to be read by title and number only.
I'll second.
Thank you. And this is not an ordinance, but we also approving adoption of resolution number 21-3320 as part of that motion and for the remainder of the staff recommendation. And second by Councilmember Johnson. So can we please do electronic vote?
One moment, please. Sorry, it's not, usually it's set up and it's not set up
If
this
it's not
time.
set up, we can do roll call then.
Okay, no, we're good.
We're good?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, that's pass 5-0. Thank you very much, council, on your support, I think, on this important item. Before we go on, I know we had an earlier speaker today, Eric Cuevas, who spoke on the alley, who was the first speaker. I'm going to ask the same thing, if he can submit something to my office, and then I'm going to ask staff to look into it and get back to the city council, and so we can understand what's going on with this alley as well. I appreciate that, Eric. If you're on, I think you're still on the phone, or you're on Zoom if you're still there. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next item on the public hearings, and that's consider adoption of resolution number 21-3321. This is bond issuance, but this is something different. I know that former Councilmember Rapp knows all about this. This is to resolve our pension liability that we've been dealing with for many years, and we've been discussing doing this bond issuance, and we got to a point we felt much more confident. So I'm going to give this to City Manager to start to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you indicated, Mr. Mayor, this has been a long-term issue, of course, with the city as well as every city in the state of California. Our CalPERS contributions on an annual basis increase significantly. The city of Montclair itself, over the course of the last 6 years, has seen increases on an annual basis in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $1 million. It is very difficult to stay abreast of those kind of increases for just one service alone, or at least one component of the city's operations. So looking at pension obligation bonds is something that we as staff have considered for a number of years now. We've had a number of questions about whether or not this was the right direction to go. We evaluated what the pluses and minuses have been, and we finally came to terms with the fact that pension obligation bonds do in fact make sense. They make sense for a variety of reasons. They provide a level of stability for the organization. They are acquired at a much lower interest rate than what we pay CalPERS on our outstanding unfunded accrued liability. They also provide the city an ability to define its budget process going forward and looking at what our costs are going to be in relation to pensions on a regular basis so that we can do forecasting and we can define what monies are available for other services that the community provides to the public. With CalPERS controlling the process, well, I would like to say it's an up and down issue, but in fact, the CalPERS rates are nothing but an up issue. So we don't have a positive downside to it, at least not in the near future. Towards the end of their, of their effort to achieve 100% financing, there is a little bit of relief that comes to the city in lower payments. But overall, agreeing to pension obligation bonds that stabilize our annual payment, and more importantly, at a lower cost point, is in fact the right way to go. Even in the event that CalPERS has some disastrous year in relation to their investments, and new UAL is added to the city's operating costs, the fact of the matter is that that new increase would be added to the old UAL if we stayed with CalPERS anyway. So paying off the UAL in advance, at least the UAL that we know about now, and then dealing with a new UAL on an ongoing basis is a much more reasonable option. You can understand that if there is a new UAL that comes up, let's say, at $500,000, 7% interest on a $500,000 UAL is a lot different than 7% on $70 million. The amount of money that you will have to pay on that $70 million obligation from that same 7% is far more drastic than that 7% on $500,000. The one is manageable, the other one is not. And that's what most cities in the state of California find themselves in, an unmanageable situation, because the size, scope, and breadth of their UAL, their unfunded accrued liability obligation to CalPERS. So that brings us to the presentation that we have for you this evening related to seeking authority on pension obligation bonds. Again, like with the last item, I will go over what you are being asked to do this evening because this is a very important process. The council is asked to consider adoption of resolution number 21-3321 that would approve the form and authorize the execution of the preliminary official statement, continuing disclosure agreement, and the pension policy that has been prepared in relation to how we would deal with any new unfunded accrued liability. The two documents, the preliminary official statement and continuing disclosure agreement, are familiar to you now because they are part of the lease revenue bonds. However, the pension policy is a new document specific to this process. Council is also asked to approve other actions related to the POBs, establish within the general fund a UAL POB amortization fund for facility management and amortization of any, management and amortization of any new UAL. And I will get into a full, obviously, discussion in relation to that, and authorize the city manager to execute each of the documents that I cited. Council will recall that in May 2020, you adopted resolution number 20-3267, declaring a state of fiscal urgency. In that adoption of that resolution, you directed the city manager to take strategic measures to reduce or avoid successive budgetary deficits stemming from the pandemic, including evaluating the issuance of POBs. At the April 2021 workshop on pension obligation and infrastructure bonds, which was presented by our underwriter, Robin Thomas, council will recall that you provided direction to proceed with evaluating both the pension obligation bonds and infrastructure bonds. Council obviously already dealt with the infrastructure bond side of that workshop presentation. On May 3, 2021, the council approved resolution number 21-3310, authorizing the issuance of POBs to repay the UAL. So the city council has already effectively initiated the process of moving forward on the pension obligation process, and this is more or less a wrap-up of that process this evening in relation to the items that you're being asked to approve. Resolution number 21-3310 also will ask you to approve the form and execution of a trust and bond purchase agreement, judicial validation, the resolution that you adopted back in May 3, 2021, also approved the form and execution of a trust and bond purchase agreement, the judicial validation proceedings, appointment of a financial team, and other actions related to the issuance of the pension obligation bonds. At that April 2021 workshop, the council was presented 3 preliminary POB alternatives, which are no longer valid for the following reasons. CalPERS investment returns for the year ended June 30, 2021 are reported at 21.3%, reducing the city's unfunded accrued liability from $82,637,507 as specified in the June 30, 2021 CalPERS valuation report to an estimated $59.6 million. So I know that sounds exciting and that there may be more and greater reductions to the UAL coming forward if we just bide our time. but the fact of the matter is that CalPERS has never experienced a 21.3% increase in their investment portfolio in any year in past memory. And the only reason that it occurred in this particular instance is that you will recall that in the pandemic, the stock market dropped to 20,000 and has now increased up to the 35,000 range. And PERS, like anybody else who is invested in the stock market, has just benefited from that massive increase in the stock market. And you're not going to see that repeated. It's not going to occur again in the latter half of 21 or in 2022 or the foreseeable future. It was an aberrational year. And a 21% gain is what CalPERS projects that it earns over a 10-year period, sometimes a 20-year period, not in a 1-year period. So it's aberrational. And as it turns out, we have simply come into a sweet spot in this process. We are the beneficiary by our evaluation of pension obligation bonds over the course of the last several years. By doing that, we ended up in this sweet spot where we get to benefit from this wonderful year that CalPERS experienced, and we are able to present to you some bonds this evening for your consideration that have a number of positive aspects to it that we do not believe will be repeated anytime soon. So from that perspective, I think you will see as we go through with this presentation that this is the right time and the right opportunity to act on consideration of these pension obligation bonds. CalPERS funding risk mitigation policy mandates that there will be a lowering of the discount rate when the fund experiences a double-digit return. Interesting, obviously. So a wonderful year, but in a wonderful year, and CalPERS made lots of money, they decided, based on this policy that was adopted, I believe, back in 2015, that when there is a year of excellent performance, you need to go back to your clients and tell them that, well, we're going to lower the discount rate, so you have to pay us more. So not only did we make more in our investments, but we're telling you, you have to give us more on top of that because we had such a wonderful year. Doesn't necessarily make sense to you or to me, but it is their policy, and thus, in November of this year, CalPERS is expected to lower the discount rate from 7% to 6.8%, at least. That is the number that they have publicly announced that they will consider lowering the discount rate to. However, that doesn't mean that they will not go lower because CalPERS has a very dynamic decision-making process, and that dynamic decision-making process doesn't allow us to interpret what they're going to do until they actually do what they do. And then when they do what they do, we interpret what they did. So until they actually lower the discount rate, we will not know what it will be. They could lower it as low as 6.5%. There is some speculation that they could go that low. We don't believe that they will go that low because they publicly announced it will be 6.8%, but that remains to be seen. A change in the discount rate to 6.8% is projected to increase the city's UAL from the $59.6 million that I pointed out to you to $63.69 million. So you can see how these minor changes to their processes can have a significant effect. So just by making that minor change to their discount rate, what they assume that they're going to earn on their investments, when they lower their assumption, it gets passed on to us. And you can see that in this particular case, it effectively passes on nearly $4 million to us just by that minor change. However, the city did make a payment of $5,761,184 in July 2021. We annually make our UAL payment in advance so that we receive a positive credit. I believe we saved somewhere around $100,000 in making the payment in advance. Having done that, And if CalPERS lowers their discount rate to 6.8%, then that means that that $63.69 million that we would otherwise owe on the UAL will actually be $61.31 million. If the discount rate is lower than 6.8%, then that will have a negative effect on the city. In other words, we would owe more than we would otherwise anticipate we would on the UAL if they lowered it to 6.8%. The city can issue POBs to fund all or a portion of its UAL, and that is effectively what we are suggesting, is that we fund the entire 100%. The POB debt service will be paid with general fund revenue, which includes funds already committed to CalPERS for UAL payments. The pension obligations are not new debt. They merely replace existing debt at a lower cost point. So the money that we allocate annually for our UAL payments, and again, the UAL payment is different than the normal cost range. That's a separate component that we will continue to have to pay going forward. But the UAL is a different component of what we pay annually to CalPERS, and that's what we're talking about as it relates to the pension obligation bonds. We will take the money that we annually allocate to the pension to the UAL, and that money will be diverted to make payments on the pension obligation bonds. The city will covenant in the trust agreement to include in its budget for each fiscal year annual necessary appropriations for POB payments. The obligation to make all the payments on the bonds is absolute and unconditional without any right or set off of a counterclaim. You have to understand that CalPERS believes that the monies owed to it are a firm and solid obligation that the city has committed to. And even in a case of bankruptcy, CalPERS argues that they are not a creditor, that in fact they are owed directly this money on an ongoing basis, and you cannot have it written off in a bankruptcy action. There have been 3 actions in the state of California in relation to special districts and a city trying to get out of their commitments to CalPERS, and CalPERS is swift and punishing in their reaction to cities that respond that way. And effectively, they have 2 recourses. One is to either pass the obligations on to other cities, making us responsible, for example, for the obligations of a community that fails to meet its commitment to CalPERS, or they take it out on the pensioners and reduce drastically the pensions that they receive for the balance of their lives when they enter into their retirement years. Pension obligation bonds are federally taxable, unlike the lease revenue bonds, which are non-taxable. Yes, thank you. What is the likelihood of new UAL if we do the pension obligation process? The city has 3 main CalPERS plans with multiple tiers: police, fire, and miscellaneous. Each plan's unfunded accrued liability is comprised of multiple, multiple amortization bases, which are positive and negative amounts generated each year based on CalPERS investment performance, actual experience, and changes in assumptions. Because of CalPERS amortization methodology, some payments increase while others drop off, creating instability in a cyclical funding environment that is projected to continue producing new UAL and significant UAL increase at least over the next 12 years, followed by a series of decreasing UAL payments in the following 12 years. However, for the first 6 years of that period, the decrease is minimal. The larger increases come in the last 6 years of that payment cycle. Other factors such as discount rate adjustments, revised mortality tables, economic conditions, investment losses and gains, and other factors could result in additional increases not presently accounted for. Funding growing pension liability challenges the fiscal ability of many municipal agencies to maintain services and produce balanced budgets. We, of course, have realized that over the course of the last several years. As I've indicated earlier, we've had to deal with $500,000 to $1 million increases annually in our CalPERS rates. And you can well imagine that other cities experiencing those same kind of increases, but don't have the same fiscal stability and the same type of fiscal management that the city of Montclair has, have a much more difficult time in dealing with their pension obligations. Minimizing annual payment increases to CalPERS can produce positive outcomes for government agencies. Through the issuance of POBs, Montclair can improve control over the level of payments required for POB debt service. Payments would be level each year, improving capacity to plan out pension expenses for budgeting purposes while concurrently producing short and long-term savings vis-a-vis our annual UAL payments that we make to CalPERS. And the city can focus on maintaining and improving services, programs, working conditions, and the city's fiscal profile. At the April 2021 workshop on pension obligation infrastructure bonds, the council did provide direction, again, to proceed with evaluating both issues. And then at the May 3rd, 2021 council, when you approved resolution number 213310, authorizing the issuance of POBs to repay the UAL, that resolution again approved the form and execution of the trust and bond purchase agreement, the judicial validation proceedings, the appointment of a financial team, and other actions related to the issuance of POBs. By adoption of resolution number 21-3321, the council approves the form and authorizes the execution of the preliminary official statement. Again, that was discussed in the previous item. It is also discussed more in depth in this particular agenda report. I give you full detail about how a preliminary official statement functions, what its purpose is. But in brief, it's presented to potential bond purchasers. The official statement describes the city and discusses the structure and financing terms of the bond issue. The continuing disclosure certificate, again, that's required by the SCE, and it requires us to update our financial data and post it on a website that is operated for the purpose of disseminating this information out to the bondholders and to the public so that they can clearly see what the city's continuing financial condition is throughout the life of the bonds. And in fact, we have to continue posting this information, I believe, for 6 months after the bond payment cycle is completed. The City of Montclair Unfunded Accrued Liability Pension Policy is that third document, and that document provides the guidance on the development and adoption of a funding plan for any UAL that are calculated annually by CalPERS or any UAL remaining immediately after the issuance of the POB. So for example, that goes to my point about whether or not they lower the discount rate less than 6.8%, then we could potentially have a remaining UAL that needs to be addressed, and the pension policy defines what the process will be for dealing with that. So the next discussion is specifically about the pension policy and how that process will work. So the objective in issuing the POBs is to produce a target funding level of 100%. In other words, we want that entire UAL balance paid off so we can get rid of that 7% discount rate, or the future 6.8, which the PERS board will consider in November, which will be retroactive back to July of this year. And again, as I indicated earlier, CalPERS decision-making process can create uncertainty, which raises questions as to the board's potential action in November related to lowering that discount rate pursuant to the fund's funding risk mitigation policy. That is, that it will reduce the discount rate by 6.8%, 6.7%, 5%, or even as low as 6.5%. We just don't know at this point. We presume it will be 6.8 because that is what they have publicly announced. In the event that the discount rate is lowered below 6.8%, again, which has been the proposed discount rate, the city would immediately realize a new UAL balance. If they lower it below the 6.8, the city will immediately realize a new UAL balance. So in anticipating that, we have instructed the underwriter to address this concern by calculating the POB issue using an assumed discount rate of 6.7%, which is slightly lower than the 6.8%. Effectively, this means that the city will borrow higher than the current actuarial estimate, thereby creating a temporary superfunded status within the UAL if the discount rate is reduced below 6.8% or 6.75%. The overfunded amount would be used to pay off any new UAL over time until depleted. So for example, if they do come in at 6.8%, but we're borrowing more than what the actuarial UAL estimate is, which would give us about $3 million in excess, that money would be held in trust, and that money would be used to pay any new UAL on an ongoing basis, which means that the city would not have to come up with the UAL payments out of its general fund. We would continue to use this bond excess to make those payments until that super fund is depleted, and then we would pick up the responsibility. If the discount rate is reduced below 6.7%, which again, I don't believe that it will be reduced below that, the superfunded amount that we would be borrowing would obviously go towards that new UAL, which would be larger than we would otherwise anticipate. And if there is a leftover component, then the pension policy comes into play as to determining how we would make our payments related to that new UAL balance, or that remaining UAL balance, which would what it would be in this particular instance. To address future UAL, the pension policy proposes establishing a UAL POB amortization fund to be used to pay off any new UAL on an ongoing basis. At its May 3, 2021 meeting, the council endorsed the concept of establishing a UAL POB amortization fund to address any new UAL while POBs are outstanding. So how does this UAL POBOF work? The fiscal year 21-22 CalPERS UAL payment of $5,761,184, that's the payment that we made earlier this year, will function as the base year UAL payment. This payment will continue to increase over the next decade if the city elects against a POB issuance. The 2023 POB debt service payment, which is the first payment due under the pension obligation bonds, which is at $4,342,705, will serve as the base POB payment. Yes, that payment will fluctuate over the course of the 19 years of the payback on the bond, but it's very minimal as far as the fluctuation. It basically stays in that neighborhood. The base POB payment of $4,342,705 will be subtracted from the base UAL payment of $5,761,184, which is effectively an amount of money that we are minimally committed to paying to CalPERS for the UAL going forward. And that will produce a remainder balance of $1,418,479. That sum of $1,418,719 would annually be transferred out of the general fund, within the general fund, to the UAL POBAF fund to achieve two objectives: annually service any new growth in the UAL, reduce the amortization period on the POB. So for example, over a 19-year period, the UAL POBAF would accrue an estimated $16.5 million plus interest in that fund. We could use that money on an ongoing basis, obviously, to pay off any new UAL, or if the UAL remains manageable over the course of successive years, then any balance remaining in that UAL POBOF as we approach the maturity of the bonds could be used to pay off the bonds earlier. City staff will also evaluate establishing a Section 115 trust as an alternative to the UAL POBOF. However, I caution that a Section 115 trust is exactly that, a trust, and the money that is committed to the trust can only be used for the purpose of committing payments to the pension obligation bonds. It cannot be used for any other purpose. Therefore, the city council loses the control. The trust will determine, with our direction, how those payments will proceed out of the trust. The only reason that I would come back and recommend to you that we go with the trust is if the interest that we would accrue on the trust is better than what we would otherwise earn by putting it in LAIF, the Local Agency Investment Fund. If there is a significant difference in the interest, then it may make sense that we put the money into that trust instead of keeping it in this fund that we would create within the general fund. But I believe that that would be the only reason I would make that recommendation to you going forward. On this particular table, you can see what the payments are in relation to the city council agreeing to the issuance of a POB. The table shows the annualized debt service on the pension obligation bonds based on an issuance of $61,870,000. Again, that is based on a 6.7% discount rate. The table also includes prior annual debt service payments to CalPERS. So as you look here, you see what the principal payment will be on each of the years. You see what the interest payment component will be for each of the years, and you see what the annual debt service is. So you can see that from year to year, the annual debt service will be about $4,340,000 going forward. And then you can see here what the prior debt service would be on the UAL if we continue to maintain payments to CalPERS, and you can see how the numbers go up and down and up and up and finally start to stabilize in the last several years. But here, the bottom line is what is important. You can see that the total payment on the debt service for the pension obligation bonds is $79,719,602.58. However, the annual payment or the payment total for the UAL to CalPERS over that same period of time would be $96,188,269.08. A huge difference, making the pension obligation bonds a worthwhile consideration. Again, the par amount on the bond would be approximately $61,870,000. That is subject to change going forward until we actually do the issuance. The tax status, federally taxable. Payoff is 100% of the UAL. The security is issued pursuant to a trust agreement, and it is an absolute and unconditional obligation of the city, secured by a validated pledge of all available funds. Interest will be payable on December 1st and June 1st of each year, commencing June 1, 2022. Principal will be payable each June 1st, commencing June 1st, 2023. It's a structured fiscal year debt service through 2041. The maturity date is June 1, 2041, and there is no debt service reserve fund that will be established. Staff recommends the adoption of resolution number 21-3321, approving the form and authorizing the execution of the preliminary official statement, the continuing disclosure agreement, and the pension policy. And each of these documents were included in your agenda package. Approve other actions related to the POBs. Establish within the general fund a UAL POB amortization fund to facilitate management and amortization of any new UAL, and authorize the city manager to execute the preliminary official statement, the continuing disclosure agreement, and pension policy. And that concludes my presentation. I am obviously available for responding to any questions, as well as Robin Thomas, our underwriter, and Danny Kim, our bond counsel.
Okay, again, this is a public hearing. Before I allow the members of the public to speak, I'll ask council if you have any questions. I see Mayor Pro Tem Rue has already started, so go ahead. with questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just one quick question. It may have been in the presentation, and in reading through everything, maybe I skipped over it. It could have been mentioned tonight, and again, there's a lot of information we're hearing verbally. The question I have is, what happens if interest rates go up?
Well, we're locked in.
We're
So,
locked in.
We're locked
So
in, yes.
This will not in any way affect us.
No. No, these bonds are locked in. We pay exactly based on the numbers in the table that I presented. Those numbers will not deviate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions, council members. I'll open up the public hearing. Members of the public speak. I see one person, Bruce Clupp. We'll recognize him. So, Bruce. Okay.
Thank you.
There he is.
Thank you very much. And, you know, again, these are complicated things with lots of money, and for the average resident, you know, this is a lot of, you know, you just look at all that money being spent. But I think, you know, after that presentation, as a member, as a resident of Montclair, you know, I appreciate the fact that we have a highly qualified city manager and staff out there that are putting these things together, understanding it, and, you know, really using the city of Montclair's money wisely. You know, you get that level of confidence as a resident that this, you know, that we have an incredible staff that knows and understands all these complicated things and can see where we can take advantage of some discounts and save money for the city overall. That looks like we're going to save quite a bit of money by issuing the bonds right at the right time, in fact, at this point in time. So as a resident, I just want to give you my support on voting for these public obligation bonds and moving forward with this thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I'll close the public hearing. I'll bring the matter back to the city council. Yeah. Oh, I apologize. Go ahead. I was supposed to, this whole thing was the members of the public and the Zoom, you're like,
I
good
was
old
waiting to
days.
make sure that whoever's on the phone or whatever got
Yeah.
a chance to speak first. As everybody knows, I've complained about CalPERS for years because they've been a pain in every city's you-know-what. So I am very happy to see something like this happening. And I wished it could have been a lot sooner, a long time ago, but at least we're finally getting to that point that it's going to happen. So thank you, Mr. City Manager, for bringing this forward. And I know that anytime you present something, you well thought it out, and I know it'll be a very good thing. So thank you, and thank you, council.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll close the public hearing, and I'll bring the matter back to the city council. I don't see any members that want to speak at the queue. So with that the case, I appreciate former council member Raff speaking, because I believe you and, of course, Mr. Pollits, his picture's right there. That's when the discussion started prior to Leonard Pollits' leaving the city council in 2013, 2014. We really began to have a discussion. How do we deal with this 100-pound gorilla? And I know Bill's here as well, and we have many challenging debates and concerns. I remember when Councilmember Martinez, Trish Martinez, when she got first aboard, she was surprised on this issue, how complicated it was, and what's the solution, and how do we fix it. And we did talk about doing these bonds about 3 or 4 years ago, and at that time, we were concerned about the risk, but we're here today, and I just want to compliment the city manager, Starr, all his work along with staff, getting to this point where we feel this is a very stable policy decision that we can make this evening. And I want to go back to, I mentioned about the voters of Montclair back in November, and this also affects services. You know, I know some people left the audience, may not be here, and this is kind of boring, but this affects services because one of our problems is that this pension obligation payment was growing every single year. And I think we started at what, $1 million prior to 2012. Here we are 12, 13 years later, It's grown for less than $1 million to now to 5.6. Why does that affect services? Because that's less money that we had to put into services. We had to take money out of, we had to reduce employees, for example. Give you an idea. We had to cut other services. This 5.5 million, perhaps we could have used in salaries. I don't want to say that, but this may perhaps make our salary competitive, which I think we're doing now with Measure L. So, Mr. Pollits once told me is if nobody else wants to speak in the council and you already have your 3 votes, stop talking and vote. So I'm going to make a motion this evening to honor Mr. Pollits on his policy that we would move to adopt resolution number 21-3321.
I will second that, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second? I think you already seconded it. I think I'm starting to get tired here, but, okay. So, Mr. Rue, second the motion, and let's have our electronic vote. Okay, that's adopted 5-0. Thank you very much, City Council. And I just want to let the public know, we just spent $110 million tonight in bonds. I kind of feel like the U.S. Congress right now, they're a $3.5 trillion proposal. Okay, last 2 items here. We have a second reading on the adoption of ordinance number 21-998. This is regarding the wireless telecommunication. I'm going to suspend the staff presentation. I'm going to open up the public hearing. I don't see anybody else who wants to speak on this item, so we're going to close the public hearing. I'm going to bring this matter back to the council. If no further discussion, is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, excuse me, I will make a motion for the adoption of ordinance number 21-998, repealing and replacing Chapter 11.73 of the Montclair Municipal Code to update regulations, standards, and create a design guidelines for wireless telecommunication facilities, and consider adoption of ordinance number 21-3323, establishing the design guidelines for telecommunication facilities, and to be read by title and number only.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Councilmember Johnson, and let's have an electronic vote. Okay. That's also adopted 5-0. I think I need to hear a number and title only. I read by number and title only.
I thought Bill was going to take care of that for me, but.
I think I said title and number only, not number and title only, but.
Ordinance number 21-998, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Montclair repealing and replacing Chapter 11.73 of the Montclair Municipal Code to update regulations, standards, and create design guidelines for wireless telecommunications facilities on public and private property, adding Chapter 11.77 to the City Municipal Code to establish an administrative permitting process, and amending Chapter 11.46 to exempt certain wireless telecommunications facilities.
Thank you. The next item is a first reading. This is actually a repeat. This is ordinance number 21-996. If you recall, the last city council meeting, we did have a staff presentation, and I commented or I requested that we include 2 changes. Two changes that will be added to the to a document that gets recorded against the property. One was relating to this actual rent charge to report the property needs due, and the second one was about the junior ADU or the primary dwelling have to be occupied by a property owner. So I don't think we need another staff presentation on this. Those are the 2 changes, and as a result of the changes, this requires another first reading. I open this up to a public hearing. I don't see any members of the public that want to speak. I'm going to close the public hearing and then bring this matter back to the council. If no further comment. Oh, Mr. Rue, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a motion to consider ordinance number 21-996, amending portions of title number 11 of the Montclair Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units, and to set a public hearing for Monday, October 4th, 2021 at 7 p.m.
Is there a second to the motion?
Be read by title and number only.
Second by Councilmember Ben Lopez, and I'm going to recognize Councilmember Lopez at this time.
I just want to go on record again and get assurances that if any private citizen regarding the ADU submits their own set of plans, but meets the requirements, they can do so, and they're not locked into the pre-approved designs by the city. All right, thank you, sir. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'm done.
Okay, no other comments? Let's go ahead and have electronic vote. That's adopted by a vote of 5-0. Next item is the consent calendar. I'm going to ask anybody on my left want to remove a consent calendar item. Anybody on my right?
We have a public comment on item C4.
C4?
Okay. Anybody on my right want to remove a consent calendar item?
No.
No? Okay, C4. All right. Somebody wants
This is
to speak on
Victoria
C4?
Jones. Yes.
All right. Item C4, so let's do this. We'll go ahead and take public comment on item C4.
Good evening, Mayor Dutre and members of City Council. My name is Victoria Jones, and I'm the Community Outreach Director of the Friends of the Pacific Electric Trail. We are the only community-based nonprofit organization that supports the 21-mile regional Class 1 bike and pedestrian trail in the Inland Empire, connecting the cities of Montclair, Upland, Rancho Cucamonga, Fontana, and Rialto. We advocate for wellness and active transportation through healthy lifestyles and active living via the PE Trail. We support trail amenities for trail users, such as rest stops and trailheads. We are here tonight because, like all trail users, we are anxious to see the completion of the replacement bridge that was unfortunately damaged by fire. Will this project be funded through insurance coverage or paid for through the general fund? We are also hopeful that the replacement design is considering incorporating fire-resistant materials. The Friends of the Pacific Electric Trail support agreement number C4 that reads, consider receiving and filing a status report on emergency contracting procedures for the Pacific Electric Trail Bridge replacement project and determining there is a need to continue the action. Consider approval of agreement number 21-63 with Biggs Cardosa and Associates for design and construction management services for the Pacific Electric Trail Bridge replacement project. Consider authorizing staff to advertise for bid proposals for construction of the Pacific Electric Bridge replacement project. We look forward to celebrating the successful completion with the City of Montclair and want to share the progress of this important project on our social media networks for all PE Trail users. Thank you for the opportunity to share this public service announcement.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion for the consent calendar as presented this evening.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Councilmember Lope, Councilmember Johnson, and let's have electronic vote. Okay, that's adopted 5-0, and we will now go down to council workshop. So we'll have a council workshop at our next October 4th meeting regarding Reeder Ranch Park development. And there's no objections. That is so ordered. We'll put that on the agenda. At this time, we go to communications, and I'll start with the city attorney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the two items that are indicated in the agenda. One, to meet in closed session regarding a potential case regarding the initiation of litigation, and the other matter is to discuss real property negotiations with Mr. Starr. Other than those two items, I have nothing else this evening.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I just want to note, obviously, that we were unsuccessful this year in obtaining the $540 million from the state as it relates to completion of the Gold Line from Pomona to Montclair. That doesn't mean that it is not going to be done. We are going to continue to try. The governor has indicated that he is willing to provide the necessary funding to complete the Gold Line. Unfortunately, for this particular year's cycle, that money was tied to high-speed rail, and the legislature and the governor were unsuccessful in coming to terms. as it relates to the high-speed rail component of the funding. But the governor did make it clear that he was willing to give Southern California $5 billion in relation to transit projects, which included the Gold Line. So we will try next year. In the meantime, and I'm sure the Mayor Pro Tem Rue will speak about it, and that is that Monday of last week, the city hosted the House Chair of the Transportation and Urban Development Subcommittee, along with Congressmember Norma Torres, for a 1-hour presentation on the Gold Line, as well as a bus tour around the Montclair Trans Center and through Claremont, through their transit district as well. And my understanding is that the chairman told Norma Torres, Congressmember Norma Torres, that the presentation was extremely informative and one of the best that he has attended. And he learned more about the Gold Line and the reasons for getting it out here than he otherwise ever would have known from any other form of presentation about the project. So it turned out to be a very successful endeavor on the part of the city to work with Congresswoman Torres to facilitate this presentation to the chair of the House Transportation Subcommittee. He controls a vast amount of money, and we are obviously going to use the infrastructure bill that President Biden is proposing as a potential alternative to state funding. Of course, that would federalize the project. We will also try to work with our legislators to see if we can have the Gold Line excluded from the NEPA process because it's already undergone state California environmental review. That exemption already exists for highway projects, so we're going to try and secure it for transit-related projects. I also want to speak on some comments that were made earlier today by Ms. Delgado related to Vernon School. As the members of the council are aware, there has been an issue with crossing guards not only in the city of Montclair, but nationally. There is simply a shortage of crossing guards, just like there are shortages of employment positions in almost every job sector throughout the United States because of people's fear of the COVID vaccine, because whatever economic issues they're dealing with, and the crossing guards have not been free from that particular impact. So when we started the school year this year, there were a number of crossing guard positions that were vacant. They are now filled. The chief and Marcia Richter, our Human Services Director, have worked with various entities to try and secure the necessary crossing guards to bring us up to full capacity. That has been a major focus in dealing with the various schools as well as the school district in responding to this crossing guard issue. The bulk of Mrs. Delgado's concern was the crossing guard at Vernon Middle School. You will recall that a warrant was conducted at that school a couple of years ago, and unfortunately the particular location in front of Vernon School did not meet the standards of the warrant. We are not permitted to put a crossing guard at a location that does not pass warrant, and that is why a crossing guard is not there. I did indicate that once we have a new Public Works Director on board, part of her ongoing objectives will be to look at each one of the locations where a crossing guard is at and evaluate whether or not we need to consider doing warrants at each of those locations. Because quite frankly, while we were dealing with this crossing guard issue, we identified a number of locations where crossing guards are at, where the crossing guards themselves said that they average about 2 students crossing the street per hour. Why are we paying for a crossing guard where 2 students are crossing in an hour when those crossing guards can be utilized at different locations with more effective control of the number of students crossing? So that will be part of the process that our Public Works Director will be responsible for, doing an objective warrant analysis of the various locations. The other part of the conversation was, of course, the city's conduct of the studies related to safe routes to schools and the systemic analysis. That is being addressed in part by the council's consideration of the bond this evening for lease revenue purposes to develop $45 million in funding to make improvements throughout the community. The council will consider projects related to that, including safe routes to schools and the changes and modifications to our roadway designs under the systemic analysis. That is going to be a developed and long-term process as we look at each one of these projects and decide how we're going to prioritize them. It was certainly not something that was going to happen overnight. I apologize if there was any misunderstanding in our communications, but certainly we are addressing each of these issues going forward. And the chief, as well as representatives from the City of Ontario, are opening communications with the school district related to the crossing guard issue. As the City Council is aware, the cities in this district pay for the cost of the crossing guards. The school districts pay zero towards the cost except for one crossing guard on Benson Avenue in which they pay 1/3 of the cost. In many other counties, the responsibility is borne by the school districts, but in our particular case, it's been borne by the cities. And the purpose of this discussion is to come to some sort of equal plane on how these costs are either shared or borne by the respective agencies. And we believe that the school district should have a larger part in this going forward, and we will try to work with that as well. So this is an evolving process, and it is not something that was going to be resolved by some comments at a council meeting. It is something we have to work on, we have to commit funding to, and we have to bring other stakeholders into the process. And I assure you that we are continuing to look at each of these issues going forward.
Is that it?
Yes.
You're
that
not going to
concludes-
introduce your new public works director?
No, that will be at a future meeting, simply because of the
Okay.
length of time that we anticipated
Okay.
tonight's meeting would go.
That's fine.
to.
We do have a new public.
But we do have a new
public
public
works
director, Monica
but
Harita. She is sitting right over here. She just raised her hand. And she, so far, has turned out to be a pretty significant asset for the organization going forward. And as soon as she prepares a bio for me, I will add my typical humor to it and make her seem to be a different animal than she obviously is. And we'll go from there.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to commend Councilmember Rue, Mayor Pro Tem Rue, for doing the tour for the goal line. I was on vacation, so I was not able to attend. And I do believe that it's just another hurdle. We have to go through that hurdle, and we'll continue on the fight for a goal line. Second of all, I know we had an incident at Montclair High School last Friday from the football game on Orchard Avenue, and there was belief that was gunshots going off, and unfortunately, the members of the public panicked in the crowd. However, the incident was professionally handled by both the school and the police department, and I just want to commend our chief. I know that was a little frantic, and there was obviously videos and posting of that on Facebook. And I understand that the investigation continues on regarding that particular incident. And then I know the crossing guards was just mentioned, and I do appreciate the fact that the police chief and also I understand Marcia's team also stepped. Where's Marcia in the audience? There she is. And because we had a shortage of crossing guards that we didn't even know about, I got a call from, well, not a call, a posting from a parent while I was on vacation about crossing guard missing at one of the schools, and that same day our staff got on top of it and started immediately working with it, and obviously they discovered that is true. They were missing crossing guards, and they immediately respond to it. I also got another complaint when I was on vacation regarding graffiti in an alley, and I appreciate staff same-day service. That was a good job. I think 3 hours later, the graffiti was removed after I got that complaint. And I'll just finally lead off. I'll finalize with my good buddy Leonard Pollits. I had nothing else to say that we all know. He definitely was, to me, one of the inspirational leaders in the city of Montclair. He was a pioneer in this city as far as I'm concerned. He led by example. He sat this dais, he didn't make a whole lot of noise, his attitude was, and I learned from that, let's not spend too much time making a lot of noise, let's spend more time about getting things done. You got your 3 votes, time to vote, let's not waste our time talking more. But Leonard was a person of integrity, he was a person of great knowledge, and in my personal life, Leonard gave me openings. He opened me up to not just politics, how to run offices here in Montclair, but he also opened me up to my careers in city government, on the planning commission, and then he opened me up to be a council member and obviously the mayor. And again, like I said earlier, I will not be here today. I will not be the mayor of Montclair today. It wasn't for Mr. Leonard Pollits, council member Leonard Pollits out there. So his services will be on Friday, October 1 at 11 a.m. at Our Lady Lord's Church. If you wish to attend, again, that's Friday, October 1 at 11 a.m. So let's start with, I'll start with my right, Mayor Pro Tem Rue.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will try to keep this quick tonight because we still have a closed session and a personnel meeting. You heard a little bit about the gold line. It was very well done. I know Councilmember Johnson was there. I, along with Councilmember Reese from the city of Claremont, did lead the discussion. We talked well about each other's cities. This is important. He highlighted some things in Montclair. I highlighted things in Claremont. We talked about the importance to the region. We covered a variety of subjects from environmental to educational to job opportunities to simply moving people through the region. The Congressmember was impressed. Congressmember Torres, of course, knows this area, but Congressmember Price knows North Carolina. One of his aides said to me, "So your 2 cities really are working together on this?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "There's a dozen cities along the Gold Line route, and all of us are speaking with one united voice." I said, "There's no protest from residents." She said, "That's unheard of." I heard later from Congressmember Torres that Congressmember Price was very impressed with how much we knew, how involved we are, and he was also impressed that he said he appreciates local officials who are working with each other, not competing against each other. And I think that's important. I also had mentioned to his aide that the city of Pomona, which is Congressmember Torres' town, was also an equal partner, and that these 3 cities are doing what we need to do to bring this vital link to our community. So I will leave it at that. It was well done. In the deference of time, I have other things, but I'd leave it alone. I did find something at home, maybe for a museum, I don't know. They are well over 30 years old. They are glasses from one of the events we used to do at the Montclair Plaza called Evening at the Plaza. And it was a fundraiser. So if we can use them here, great. If not, I'll put them at home and maybe in the future when we have a museum to put them in. But they're a part of our history here in the city of Montclair. It's a different time and place, but it was a very nice function. And I'll leave it at that in the deference of time tonight.
Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few comments. Mr. Rue, if you find any more of those glasses, I will buy the council a bottle of wine, and we could share them.
I have a bottle of wine.
We could share them here at the dais.
I think I had more at home and they're
Okay,
broken over
perfect.
the years.
Then I'll bring wine next meeting. Want to piggyback on some of the comments. I'll go through them quickly. I live in the same alleyway as Mr. Cuevas, or Cuevas, I should say. I want to let him know that even before I was on council for the past 8 years, and Mary would know this, and prior staff, and Gabe, and current staff, that I also have been bringing up those concerns. I live with them and see them daily. The potholes have been fixed by Public Works, the patchwork over the years, so I appreciate that. The illegal dumping, the graffiti has been abated as best the city can. But I appreciate your activism and you coming forward and being proactive. And hopefully we can get that addressed. And yes, the alleyway does need to be repaved. I'm sure it will be done soon, but we're just in a holding pattern for now. Unfortunately, I was doing some search online. I looked at the new issuance of SAFER grants. As of current date, Montclair has not issued any SAFER grants. I know that our budget was hopeful and had a desire of getting that to fund the 2 squads in the fire department. Knowing that we're probably not going to get those, I hope that we could come back to the drawing board and look at funding those. This Saturday, September 25th, starts the fall season of Montclair Little League. I am the manager of the, get this, John, I'm the manager of the Dodgers this time.
Oh, you have to wear blue.
I have to wear blue this time.
Okay.
I was overruled by the parents involved, so I went ahead and went along. But if you have nothing to do on Saturday mornings and afternoons, come out and support the youth in the city playing baseball. But we do start this Saturday, the 25th. The mayor brought up the incident on September 15th at Montclair High. I was able to stand outside and hear the helicopter overhead make his announcements. I was approached by several residents on my street, and then those from former parents of baseball teams that I've coached in a frantic state asking me what's going on, and of course the rumors about there being a shooting. I'd like to caution the public, for those that are paying attention, please, 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 let's be prudent in what we post, because it only added to the problem. Let's get all the facts first before we post. That's the only advice I can give. Chief, thank you to you and your police officers for investigating and calming the situation down immediately. And kudos to Sergeant Aguilar as well. Thank you, sir. Let's see real quickly. There is graffiti still. It's been about 3 weeks. Central and Orchard, the southwest corner behind the gas station. There is the alleyway there. I think, Mary, I may have brought that up to you at one time. It's getting out of hand again, unfortunately. But some of it has been there quite a while. If staff can look into that, please, it'd be appreciated. And then for those of you that use the 10 freeway and Central Avenue, starting tomorrow at 5 a.m. and basically a matter of hours from now, the eastbound off-ramp, the eastbound Central off-ramp will be closed from the 21st through October 1st. So please make appropriate adjustments to your route. Central Avenue eastbound off-ramp will be closed September 21st to October 1st. And then on a personal note, I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't have a council meeting for the past month, but in looking what had transpired and what has happened, it was meant to be. God knew what he was doing. At the last council meeting, I announced that I had a family member who at that time we thought was going to pass. And I had made comment that if I had to excuse myself, to please give me a little bit of grace and understanding. And ever since that meeting, our relative was in the hospital for 70-plus days in ICU. And I'm sad to report that a few hours early this morning or evening, it all seems like a blur, he had passed. So I appreciate the staff that had offered some kind words the past month, but a family and I today were at a funeral home making arrangements. But nonetheless, I do appreciate the sentiments, and for those of you that offered some kind words, it means a lot, and I won't forget it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm done.
Thank you. We will give you condolences to your family and yourself and to your family.
Oh, and that's why, sir, I'm sorry, that's why I'm not going to League of Cities after all, because of a family need.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple quickies. We all heard earlier from Ruby Long from Kurt Hagman's office about the shredding event that is this Saturday. So I guess it's the weekend of getting rid of stuff, because there's also an e-waste event at the Montclair Chamber of Commerce, Saturday from 9 to 2 and Sunday from 9 to 2. It is a drive-through event. You just drive through, somebody will take the stuff out of your car, and you'll be on your way. So if you've got some old electronics that you need to get rid of, now's the time. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes, I'd also like to share my condolences to the family of former council member Leonard Pollits, and also to the city and the staff that worked with him. What I can say about him is, even off the council, he never stopped being passionate about the city, and he loved his city. So I had a lot of respect for him, and I still do.
Thank you. So at this time, I apologize, send myself an email. At this time, we will now go into closed session, and I'll just remind everybody again, we'll adjourn the meeting in memory of our friend, Councilmember Leonard Pollits. And of course, we'll also, in memory of the 13 service members who passed in Afghanistan. Thank you.